Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is a millennial and Gen Z talk about, and today we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones. So we're going to be discussing all four movies, and then at the end we're going to be talking, giving our thoughts on the upcoming fifth movie. So my name is Brian. I'm the Tank Thinker, and I'm a millennial.
My name is Brandon Price, and I am Gen Z.
All right. So just so that you know where we're coming from, I was not a huge Indiana Jones fan. I had watched the movies maybe like once or twice when they were giving on TV when I was younger. Recently, me and Brandon, we watched all four movies together so that we could sort of analyze it together and talk about things that we liked, things that we disliked, and things that we would want to see for the new movies. So, Brandon, I'll let you talk about your experience with Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I think you would call yourself a fanatic, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I saw the all four Indiana Jones movies when I was 3 years old. My dad showed them to me. And instantly when I saw them, my mind was blown. Had all the elements of a great movie. Good comedy, great action, great acting, great cinematography, and really unique and great effects. So, as a child, I rewatched these movies multiple times. I've at least seen Raiders of the Lost Ark over 500 times.
And so right now you're in your mid-teens. So you've
Yeah.
been watching Indiana Jones for what, more than a decade, you'd say now?
Oh, I'd say so. Yes.
Okay. And was there like one thing that specifically just made you, I mean, there's so many other TV shows, there's cartoons, there's online stuff going on. So what was it about Indiana Jones that made you stick to that?
Well, number one, I'd say it was the first movie that I saw that I could tell that everyone who was making it was having a good time, right? Like I could, you know what I mean? I watched behind the scenes footage and just seeing even Harrison Ford, he's kind of got the reputation as a bit of a grumpy guy, but he even says that he enjoys making every single one of the films. Even,
So
Indy
would you
4.
say that Harrison Ford as an actor, that he was a big part of what drew you as well?
Oh yeah, definitely, man. What makes him such you could relate to him. He wasn't a perfect guy, and yeah, I think every kid wanted to be Indiana Jones for those who saw it, including me. Um,
So
and
what was better about Indiana Jones than like cartoon shows that were giving on TV? What like I think you started what age? You were like 4 or 5 when you
like
first saw it.
3 or 4, three
Three
years
or
old,
four, yeah.
not young.
That's like prime age to be watching, like
Yeah.
YTV cartoons, and yet you're sort of attracted to this movie that's a lot of people could say is more for adults, or at least PG-13. Um, so what was missing from the cartoons that you found in these movies that made them your like main focus?
I'd say it's the perfect balance of realism and fictional world. Um, as soon as I got a taste for it, if you know what I mean, just getting, let's say, a quick action scene, seeing how realistic and how well done it is, then going back to cartoons as a kid, it's not the same. It's getting your first taste for a good cinema.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I remember when I watched Indiana Jones when I was younger, I did really like it. But it didn't stick to me. I think I had for a long time when I was younger, I had this bias towards newer stuff, and
Oh,
I wanted the new graphics, I wanted the nice new things, and to me, I was like, Indiana Jones is kind of old. It's the older generation, right?
oh,
And I had that bias, and that bias has completely gone away as I've gotten older. And like even when we watched the movies recently, I remember watching the movies and I was just like blown away because yeah, yes, it doesn't have the amazing CGI that the new movies have, right? That newer movies have,
yeah.
but it has something that we've discussed before, which is it has heart, and it
Oh
has
yeah.
that relatability, and it has that their strength of character in these movies, whereas a lot of movies nowadays have sort of a cookie cutter will
Hmm.
have a cookie cutter sort of approach.
Yeah,
So
this whole movie was basically a homage to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's childhood, which they grew up seeing 1930s and 40s serial movies and episodes, with a lot of cliffhangers and crazy action. So this was a homage to their childhood, and like you said, it has heart, and you can definitely tell.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think let's go through all four movies and we'll talk about some different aspects of it. We'll talk about things that weren't great, the best parts of the movie. We'll talk about some signature scenes, some of the characters, and obviously we're gonna start with which one's the first one we start with?
Raiders of the
Remind me
Lost
again,
Ark.
since you're the expert. Raiders of the
Raiders of
Lost
the
Ark.
Lost Ark
Okay.
came out in 1981.
So this is the movie in which Indy has to recover the Ark of the Covenant,
Yes.
right? And okay, tell us a little bit more about.
Okay. So I'll just give the brief rundown.
And
We
sorry,
get
is this the first movie in the series, or is this the first movie that was released to the
this was
public?
the first movie that's released.
Okay, but it doesn't necessarily because the timelines
The
aren't.
timeline, Temple of Doom is actually a prequel.
Ah, okay,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
So we'll go by when it was released to the public.
yeah. Let's go with that.
Okay, so Indy is a this archaeologist professor. He gets tasked to help the FBI find the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, the U.S. government. Yes, find the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay, and he has some interactions with basically Nazis who want to use it to make themselves more powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So first of all, let's talk about: is there anything in this movie that you didn't particularly like?
I'm really biased towards it. Since when you watch
Sorry,
something,
is this your favorite movie? Let's start out with that.
my favorite. That's hard. I think it's tied with Last Crusade. So
Okay,
technically, it is my favorite movie.
okay, so we'll say that. And is there anything because you're like the absolute expert. So if
Yeah.
there's all about the movie, like we were just watching some of the scenes and you could tell scene by you were telling me without even watching, you could tell me scene by scene what was happening.
Yeah.
So is there anything in the movie that you thought maybe could have been done a little bit better or maybe wasn't to its full potential?
I can bring up the argument that everyone gives of this movie,
Okay.
which I don't agree with. And basically, the biggest argument everyone gives to Raiders of the Lost Ark was brought up in The Big Bang Theory, which is Indiana Jones doesn't have a purpose in the movie. Like, if you take him out of the equation, he's useless and the plot doesn't change. Which is not entirely true. Even, let's say it was true. Even if it was true, I generally don't.
But
give a
okay,
shit about that.
that I've never heard that one before, but I find it interesting because who would be going after the Ark of the Covenant if Indiana Jones wasn't?
Basically, the point is that if he wasn't there, the Nazis would have easily gotten the Ark of the Covenant, and they would have died either way. If they
Oh, they're saying that Indiana Jones didn't really have an impact.
yes, you can take him out of the movie, and the outcome is exactly the same. All the Nazis die.
Okay, so what do you think about that argument?
I can see what they mean, but I don't think it's entirely true because if let's say everything went to plan, I think the Ark would have gotten lost, and the government wouldn't get access to it. Because you have to remember, Indiana Jones not only did the Nazis die, Indiana Jones brought the Ark back to the government. So I think if it was out in the open,
somebody else
could
could
have
have
died,
gotten it.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
So I think there's that, and that
Okay,
so I think
interesting.
it still has an
Interesting.
impact there.
Okay, do you want to know what I think about that argument? Just having heard it for the first time here.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that is actually a strength of the movie because
Really?
yeah, because what I think is this. It's like okay, yes, Indiana Jones didn't have an impact essentially, but he was still there fighting to have an impact. It's almost like they're saying, okay, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's almost a philosophical argument. Yes, in the grand scheme of things, maybe you don't have an impact, but you still have to fight the fight. It's a expression of character, of deeper character. So I kind of understand in a way because it's like okay, movies, the hero, we're supposed to be made to feel like the hero contributed, pushed the plot forward, contributed something. But I think in that regard, Indy was pushing the plot by engaging with the story. even though
Yeah.
maybe at the end of the day he didn't have, the real impact that the hero in the hero's journey is supposed to have.
Yeah. That's well said. Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it kind of shows that the hero doesn't have to be perfect. You know what I mean? It's kind of like real life. If you do a good thing, you're not always going to end up on top, and you're not going to always, you
Yeah,
know what
and
I mean?
in a lot of times in our lives we go through efforts and nothing comes of it, maybe, right?
Right?
And
So
same with Indiana Jones, but he had that experience.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the sort of the best aspects, um the things that define this movie, even in comparison to the other Indiana Jones movies.
Ooh, okay. I think you have to give it credit for starting the ball rolling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think this movie, every other movie uses aspects from the previous film, right? It introduced Indiana Jones, of course.
So it
Introduced
builds
Mary Ravenwood.
upon what was,
Yeah.
yeah, before.
It also took a lot of risks as well. This movie was kind of made to be a disaster almost. You know, it was meant to be undershot. Not a lot of companies wanted to do this movie because it's quite a daunting movie. If you go up to a company and say, "I want a bunch of money for this movie that's gonna have so much action and so many stunts," even though they're not certain it's gonna do. And Spielberg, who directed this, didn't have the greatest reputation in Hollywood because he had been he shot over quite a bit, like
So essentially,
shot.
what it sounds like is it was almost like an experiment. Like,
Yeah,
let's take this concept. Spielberg and George Lucas got together and they said, let's take this concept, this idea that we love. Let's find a production company to make it, and let's put it out there and see what people think.
yeah. And you mentioned heart. Don't get me wrong. I think the other films do have heart, but this film was such a big risk to the point where they weren't certain if they were going to make a lot of money. And this definitely shows that it's hard, right? They had no other reason for making this than they wanted to see it themselves.
Okay, let me ask you this: do you think that they sacrificed anything in the making of the movie in order to to try and make money, or do you think it was, no, this is what my actual original vision, version or vision of the movie is? We're gonna put it out there exactly. Maybe Spielberg and Lucas said this, thought this, that they were gonna put it exactly how they thought, and characters would just, the audience would just have to deal with their version. Like, they weren't
No,
gonna sell out and try and do things for.
I think this movie was intended the way that was going to be. Like I mentioned, this was inspired by 30 serials. And
Mhm.
basically, those things were basically epic episodes that were left in cliffhangers, right, with a ton of action. And this movie was designed from the beginning to be very entertaining, the way those 30 serials are.
But let me ask you this: was Harrison Ford the original actor slated to play Indiana Jones?
No, he wasn't. He actually got lucky. Here's how
Oh.
so it was originally Tom Selleck, who did Magnum PI, and he got
Okay.
hired. George and Steven agreed, and he was going to do it. They cast him. But it turns out his TV show commitment with Magnum PI prevented him from doing it. So they couldn't use Tom Selleck. Their main guy was out.
Blessing in
And
disguise.
yeah, so in the meantime, George Lucas was showing Steven Spielberg a cut of Empire Strikes Back, right?
Uh,
And then Steven Spielberg saw Harrison, and he's like, "That's Indiana Jones," right?
wow.
And at first, George kind of hesitated because he doesn't like using the same actors multiple times. He's
Mhm.
like, he's Han Solo, you know what I mean? He's not, you know what I mean? He's cemented as the character. But Steven's like, he's an actor. Yeah, he's supposed to play different people. I think he's good for the role. And they called him up. Harrison said yes, and he went for it. And wow, you know what I mean? And now you can't imagine anyone else but him playing the
I
character.
couldn't imagine Tom Selleck playing Indiana Jones, to be
Oh,
honest.
with the
I can't.
mustache.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, that's a great story. I love stories like that because it makes the whole thing more interesting, right? When it's like it's not the guy that was supposed to be, and he just comes in and
Yeah.
he takes the role, and then he's just perfect for it, and you can't, like you said, you can't imagine anybody else.
Hmm.
So let's move on to some of the iconic, best scenes from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I think the most iconic scene in this movie might be the most iconic scene in all of Indiana Jones, not just this movie,
Okay.
which is the opening like 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, which is like the boulder, the idol, him using the swinging on the whip. Basically that whole temple sequence where has the fertility idol and he escapes.
Yeah, and you,
And
you talked about before how it's almost like a mini movie. It's
yeah,
like
you can
they're
take the first 50
showing
minutes.
they're showing the audience like this is what you can expect from Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it has a beginning, middle, and end. You know, it has a climax. It shows Belloc. We have a villain. We have our main character. We have our MacGuffin. It's almost again. It's a whole mini movie that works.
Yeah, and I especially and it became iconic across like so many different other movies, right? The huge boulder that chases
Yeah.
the adventure, through the as a
The
trap.
door closing, and then he quickly goes under the door,
Yeah,
just in time.
yeah, exactly. And he gets it right in time, and it had the things that shot through
The
the
walls,
walls,
right? You
right?
had the
Yeah,
guards.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was really impressed about, and I actually didn't even see, even when we watched the movie recently, I didn't actually notice this. And then somebody mentioned to me, I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned it to me after, how Indiana Jones, when he's going through with the that guy who plays Doctor Octopus in the
Yeah.
second Spider-Man
Satipo.
movie, how
Yeah.
he pretends to that character that I can't remember the exact details, but that the
It's like a
trap
light
is
trap.
triggered by light, but
Right.
when
When
it was really triggered by his foot,
yeah, it was just like a little thing on the ground that he
right?
pressed.
And
Right.
so it kind of shows, and it's amazing because I guess it's a little bit hard to notice if if you're just watching it. Maybe you have to watch it a few times to really notice that little detail. But it shows such a huge character defining sort of moment for Indy right off the bat of how he's intelligent because he's already thinking ahead to this guy's gonna screw me over.
Oh yeah, even the novelization. When they see the golden idol for the first time, Indiana Jones immediately knows that's Satipo. Like, yeah, he wants the idol. He's gonna take this shit. They mention like, oh, he's looking into its eyes. He already knows he's gonna want this thing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and in those first 10-15 minutes is at what point do we ever see Indy failing at any point?
yeah, we do. He gets the idol stolen from him, and he doesn't get it back in that movie.
Yeah,
Belloc
so
takes
so
the idol from
essentially
him.
what we see is we see we get introduced to our hero Indiana Jones. We see that he's competent because he's navigating through the traps, and he doesn't get scared when they see the that big
Statue.
statue thing, right? So he's navigating through the traps. He knows where to find the idol. So we see that he's smart. We see that he's competent. We see that he's brave, right? He outruns a boulder. We see that he has physical fitness. We see that he can go through, but at the end of the day, he kind of gets outsmarted a little bit,
Yeah,
right? We have this villain, and that's actually a great thing to do in a movie is right off the bat show that the villain has greater competency than the hero, because then the hero has to grow or has to figure out a way to beat the villain. That's kind of a big thing about the
yeah,
hero's journey. But we see that he's human, right? He gets outsmarted and he gets outplayed,
yeah.
plain and simple.
Another iconic scene. There are quite a bit, but I think again another really iconic scene. This is when the swordsman. You know, he's in Cairo. He's looking for Marion. The guy with the swordsman comes out. He does a bunch of crazy, a bunch of crazy tricks. And Indiana Jones pulls out the gun and just shoots him. I
Yeah,
love that.
and there's a story behind that scene, right? So what's the
Oh
story?
yeah, yeah. So the basic story is originally that fight was supposed to be an epic sword versus whip. You know, Indiana Jones was going to do a bunch of crazy whip stuff, and there was a butcher shop in the back as well. And it was all planned. But on the day of filming, while they were filming in Cairo, they were actually not filming in Cairo, but it was supposed to be. When they were filming, everyone got food poisoning at a restaurant, including Harrison Ford, right? So
Mhm.
everyone felt terrible. And the only person who didn't was actually Steven Spielberg because he brought his own canned food for filming.
That's actually
Uh,
hilarious.
so everyone felt terrible, and Steven says he's the one who suggested it to shoot the guy. Harrison Ford, he suggested it, but the basic is Harrison said, "I'm not feeling. Let's just shoot the guy." Right?
Like
It's just
he
like that.
just wasn't that. He's like I don't want to do this
Yeah.
crazy shit. Just let's just shoot the damn guy. That's it.
And the greatest part is when he shoots the guy, you can see in Harrison's face that he's so done with everything. Like he feels like shit. Like you could see he's kind of like blow, like he's not feeling good.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie as a kid. watching that scene specifically as a kid, and like me and my dad and my brother were just laughing our asses off, right? Because the guy's like, he's trying to show off with his sword
Yeah.
and he just pulls it. So it's funny that there's like actually a story behind it.
Yeah, I watched this movie in theaters because they did a rerun in theaters, and that scene everyone laughed. It's a great scene. It's a lot of
Nice,
fun.
nice. So another scene that actually comes before that I want to talk about is Marion's intro,
Ooh, yeah, Marion's great character.
because I for whatever reason I never really thought highly of Marion
Okay.
before I saw the movies, and then when I saw the movies I like fell in love with her. I mean, she's super cute, she's badass, she's awesome, and I loved how she was in that scene and she's out drinking
The guy,
the
right?
guy. Yeah, but what was amazing about it was, I think in a lot of modern movies today, when the female is in a position, because they try and build up the female in this unrealistic way, so they make her like super powerful or super awesome. So like they do it very condescendingly, like, yeah, I'm amazing, like, look at me. Like, if it was made in a modern day by like somebody else, right, it would
Yeah.
be her like drinking 3 shots in a row while the other guy's struggling to do one, and she's like perfectly sober and has no problem, right? And she gets up and she's, wearing high heels, and whatever. Like, they would make it really stupid and over the top. But this scene was perfect because you see that she's still struggling to go ahead, but she's pushing ahead anyway,
Yeah.
right? It almost mirrors Indy in
Oh
how
yeah,
he
they're
kind of
definitely toe to
struggles.
toe, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and even
Right.
after, doesn't she like kind of stumble a bit, like, because she's a bit too drunk, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, she does. She almost loses, but then she wakes up. She's like, Pesota, Pesota. Everyone's like, yeah, and she wins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
great.
she wins like by a hair, like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the kind of badass character, especially female character, that you want. And I love how, like, when she sees Indy, and they hinted at the history between them,
oh
and
yeah,
when she first sees him, she has this like reaction, like, oh, it's you, like, that there's something there,
going.
and then what does she do? She punches him, right?
Yeah, just yeah, right in the face. Yeah.
Like, boom. And I remember Indy's face being like, holy shit, like, like that. Like, it's almost like he's remembering what he's missing, oh yeah, I remember, she's not like the others.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about one or two more scenes, and then we'll move on to Temple of Doom.
yeah. Should we talk about the big set piece? What do you think?
What's the sep? Oh, are you talking about the
The
truck scene?
truck scene.
Yes,
Actually, no.
yes.
Before the truck scene, how about can we talk about the fist fight between Indiana Jones and the big bald guy
With the where the plane?
with the plane? Yeah,
With the plane? Yes,
that's great. I fuck.
absolutely. Because
Dude, so it starts off basically. Indiana Jones. The Ark is getting put onto a plane, right? So Indiana Jones has to stop the plane. So he plans on taking it. So he one guy he beats Indiana Jones beats the shit out of him fairly well, right? And he's about to take control of the plane, right?
mhm.
And then this big shredded bald guy who's like twice the size of it, and he comes
And
out.
he's a Nazi too, right?
Right? Yeah, he's a Nazi. He sees him. And he calls him like boy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, come on, let's go fight. And Indiana Jones has this face where he's like done with everything. He's like, ah,
Yeah,
fuck.
his expression is like, oh, I gotta fight this guy, but he does
And
it
what's
anyway, right?
yeah, he goes for it, and he fights really dirty, right? Because he can't compete with this guy. So he's doing like he's hitting him in the balls. He's trying to get trick shots in there. He grabs sand, throws it in his eye, bites him. Like he has to fight dirty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's realistic, and he gets his ass beat pretty badly. He literally gets punched in the face once, and he falls on his ass on the ground, out of breath.
Yeah, and but how does he end up, pulling through?
So what happens is eventually, and he still gets a few good punches there, but ultimately he's on the ground, right? And the plane's coming, the propellers, and the guy's about to finish off Indy, and then the plane, the propellers, slice the guy up, right?
Does
And
he push him into the propellers, or he just doesn't tell him that it's there, kind of thing?
he doesn't tell him there. He kind of smiles and then looks away, and the German kind of say, "What the?" And he turns around, and he's like, "Ah!" And it slices him up, blood goes everywhere.
See, that isn't that such an interesting choice, for the character, because it's like so many movies I feel would make it so that it's like the character's perfect.
Yeah,
Like, oh no, he's gonna fight this guy fairly, and he's gonna win, right? And then, but then it's like, okay, but if we were in a real situation and they fought fair,
Yeah.
that character's not going to win.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so he has to do everything. I mean, the fate of the world, the Nazis getting the Ark of the Covenant could be disastrous for the entire world. He
Yeah.
doesn't have time for fair. He has to, he has to take every advantage. I think it shows more about him taking every advantage that he can,
Yeah.
as opposed to thinking that honor has to prevail in every situation, which
And
I
what's
think
also
is a
great
more
about
realistic
yeah.
character.
And what's great about the scene too is Marion's also doing something. She actually takes out the guy who was flying the plane, who was trying to shoot Indy. She knocks him out. She gets in the plane, uses the machine gun, shoots a car down and a bunch of people. She's still doing crazy shit while Indy's fighting the guy. You know, she's
Yeah,
still toe to toe with
she's a
Indy.
badass character.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
then
okay, let's the last scene we're gonna talk about is the truck scene.
yes,
The truck chase where Indy's trying to recover the Ark of the Covenant from the Nazis.
yes, this is really well directed, right? There's some great
And would you
cinematography.
say it's one of your favorite action
Set
chase
pieces of all
scenes
time.
of all time?
Definitely, yeah. It's tied with the tank, but we'll get into it in a sec. This scene is it's just so fun. Um, and it's well directed. And what I mean by there's a great. It shows first of all you have to show what's it called? You have to show your hero, right? It's got the music dun 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 dun. So
Mm-hmm.
our hero. We get a pan shot of every single car, right?
Yeah.
So we know what Indy's going against. So it gives us that idea. So when he's looking at that, we're also looking at it. We have the same thought process of him, or that's what I'm gonna have to go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's like it's setting up the challenges that our
yeah.
hero is gonna have to face.
And there's a few little details. So everyone knows that like a villain is gonna have to miss their shots, right, to not hit their video. The main character, but it actually makes sense. So Indiana Jones is when he's on the horse, he's taking cover right beside the ark. So the people shooting him are more cautious. That's why they're missing. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to shoot the ark. It's small little details like that which I think make
Exactly.
it
And
even
then,
better, right?
when he's driving the truck, right, and he's smiling, and
That
what
lets our
did
guard down, right?
and what did you to talk about that a little bit?
So another great scene is so Indiana Jones. Basically, the Nazis start climbing on the truck, and Indiana Jones is ramming into walls and trees and stuff. And eventually, Indiana Jones starts smiling. Indy's smiling, having a bit of a good time. And when that happens, that lets us being like, yeah, dude, we're having a good time as well. This is pretty fun. And then suddenly, a German shoots him in the shoulder, or a Nazi shoots him in the shoulder, right? And the music goes serious. You know, John Williams. The music's great. Goes all serious. Done, done, done. And so by him laughing that lets our guard down because we're laughing with him. So when he gets shot, it makes it so much more impactful.
Yeah, it's like saying like, hey, this isn't too dangerous. Like
Yeah,
he's gamifying it. He's having a good time with it, and then out of nowhere, bang! It's almost like a consequence of him letting his guard down. Is bang,
yeah,
he gets shot, and then suddenly it's real again and it's raw, and you're like, oh shit! And there's blood on the windshield, and you have to
yeah.
you have to acknowledge that blood that's there, right?
And then one basically eventually there's only one Nazi left in the truck, and he climbs. He's smarter than everyone else. Instead of going on the sides and Indiana Jones seeing them on the mirrors, he goes on the top of the truck, so Indiana Jones doesn't see him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes through the window, kicks him, punches him with the gun in his gun hole, right, like where he got shot.
Right in this,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's so like I can feel like he raised his knuckle a little bit while punching him. You know what I mean? Like to make
Mm-hmm.
it even worse. Really
For
getting
sure.
in there. And then he throws Indiana Jones through the windshield. Indiana Jones is grabbing onto the Mercedes Benz logo thing. You know what I mean? He's struggling, and then the Nazi starts accelerating the truck so he could hit a car in front of him. So Indiana Jones would get hit by another car.
And
Indiana
then he
Jones,
goes under, and we have the
great
drag
stunt.
scene.
And Indiana Jones starts dragging with his whip, and which is also Harrison Ford was also doing dragging. He actually got bruises on his chest, but good on him for doing it. Climbs up.
How many takes did they have to do for that?
I'm sure it's just multiple, like one or two.
Yeah,
There's some
that
great
must have hurt
percentage.
because that's like real ground and stuff. It's not like mats or anything,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I know they put what's it called? They put like a little like white sort of protection thing like
On,
under the shirt,
under
under
the
the
shirt,
jacket.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
you'd have to,
but it's still like you have the risk of falling over on your back. You know what I mean?
for sure,
Or
for sure.
so props to him for doing that. It's great. Harrison really tries to do as many stunts as he could,
Yep.
include in all four movies, even four. Even though he was 65, he still did it. But this scene is not only is it one of my favorite scenes, it's also George Lucas's favorite scene because it was kind of this whole truck chase scene was kind of the inspiration for let's just do this movie, right?
Yeah, it was
Uh,
probably like when sorry, George Lucas was imagining the story in his head, right? Like I'm somebody who develops stories too, and I know that when you develop a story, a lot of times you think about one scene that you think would be really cool and really awesome and that people would find enjoyable, and you can build an entire story around that scene. So this could have even been that scene for George Lucas.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, last
And
thing on the arc, let's talk about the final scene. Is there a scene where somebody gets melted or something?
yeah, so basically the Nazis end up opening the ark. At first, nothing happens, or like just sand, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's their guards down. Then suddenly,
Spoilers for anybody that hasn't
yeah, yeah,
watched it.
spoilers. Uh, then
But at this
suddenly,
point, it's like, come on.
yeah. But then suddenly stuff starts coming to this. The ghosts start coming out of the ark. Everyone's like, "What the fuck?" Then we see this ghost come out, and it almost looks. She's beautiful. It's like it looks like an angel, right? And then suddenly her face turns into like a skeleton. Everyone's screaming and shit. Indiana Jones is telling Mary, like, "Shut your eyes." My guess is that they're playing dead.
Mhm.
But my theory is that the spirits actually know that Indiana Jones and Marion are the good people.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, then Belloc's head explodes. You know,
Does his
uh, D-
skin melt and stuff?
oh, one of them does. So
It
Dietrich's head
wasn't there some
shrinks.
controversy about that with the movie when it first
Yeah,
came
yeah.
out? Like parents were upset or something.
That we'll get to the second one in a bit. We'll talk about the second one.
Oh,
Um,
was that in
yeah,
Temple
yeah,
of
yeah.
Doom?
Second, yeah, template. So anyway,
Oh, okay,
uh,
okay.
Belloc's head explodes. Dietrich's head shrinks, and then Toad's head starts melting. Great effect too. You can see the hat, like that hat no longer fits him, which is great
Yeah.
when his face is melting. Um, Super gory, but like I don't know how to explain it, but for some reason the gore in that scene doesn't make me like gag as like
Hmm.
Sling and Saw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something like you know what I mean? Like it's you deserve it. You know, so I think it's well done. And then all the Nazis, that all the dead Nazis disappear. My guess is they all are put into the ark as their souls are put
They
into
get
the
like
ark, right?
sucked into the arc. Yeah.
And then the ark lid closes like nothing ever happened. Indiana Jones and Marion open their eyes and they're safe.
Wow.
Great, great scene, I think. Jesus, dude. It's a great tone shift. The music's great too. It's almost like horror music. It's really good.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So let's move on to Temple of Doom. So this movie, I think both you and I can agree, has the most worst aspects out of all the movies.
Yeah, I still love this movie. Actually, as a kid, this is still one of my favorites. It almost is at the top. But there are some things that I think don't age as well. I don't think it aged as well as Raiders.
Okay.
Also, it's very controversial
the,
too.
yeah, and there's a few different things about this movie. I think the one for me, and maybe you'll agree with me here, the biggest thing I hated about this movie was the female character. I don't even remember her name.
Willie, yeah.
Willie was just absolutely terrible, like a screeching shrew that just wouldn't shut up. She had no redeeming. Her only
Yeah.
redeeming quality was her looks. That's
Yeah,
it.
I think she punched a thuggy at one point,
Okay,
during
so
the minecart
she,
stage.
she instinctually punches because maybe whatever, but she how hard was it for Indy to push her to get involved in order to help them? Do you remember that part? Of
Yeah,
course
it
you do,
was.
but right?
Yeah,
Compare that to Marion, who she's at front and center. If Indy was like, I don't want to do this, I'm staying behind, she'd be like, okay, screw that, I'm still going in. That's Marion. This
yeah,
Willie girl, she's like, she belongs on a fashion set or something. She can't
yeah.
be an
She's a
adventurer.
nightclub singer, right?
She's exactly the opposite type of character as Indy,
Yeah,
and I think very poor decision. And I know that
yeah,
you have a theory
yeah.
about
A
what's
reason.
going
This is
on
what
there.
most people
So
think.
okay, you explain the theory.
So, number one is they wanted they did they couldn't they didn't they wanted it to be like James Bond, where every movie has a different lead girl at the time. So as much Stephen wanted Marion and George wanted Marion to come back, but they kind of agreed it should be like James Bond, where a different adventure each time with a different leading lady. Um, so they wanted to kind of go for a completely different character for Marion, but like they really went to like the opposite of Marion. And they kind of developed this character, which is basically an annoying, screaming girl who's a nightclub singer who was brought into the adventure. And I have a
Yep.
theory why she was kind of designed to be annoying. George Lucas is going through a divorce at the time,
Yep.
so
Yep.
I think that possibly some of his feelings about his
How
ex-wife.
how strong is this theory in like the Indiana Jones hardcore
A
community?
lot of a lot of people kind of like, yeah, dude, he was going through a rough time. Also, another thing that Steven mentioned was George wanted it to be the same kind of structure as the original Star Wars trilogy, which is the second one is the darkest of the three. So this movie is a lot dark. There's a scene with the dude getting his rip heart out. Another theory, I think that someone else mentioned this. I watched the video. Is that the guy getting his heart ripped out is actually it's symbolical for George Lucas's heart getting ripped out
Ripped
from
out by his
yeah.
ex-wife. Or
That's what I think. So I think he was kind of intended to be this annoying, screaming. I guess it was just
so
what he was dealing with at the time.
it's almost like his negative view of women got tainted, and he's like, this is how
Yeah.
we're gonna portray women in this movie.
Yeah.
It's such a stark difference from Marion, and it's a little it's very disappointing. But I will say, the way Indy reacts to her is very funny.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
And they
good.
did that right, at least.
Yeah.
Like
Even
they're
Charles made some good like like he was also it was good. It
I,
was well done.
I specifically remember a scene where him and Short Round are playing cards,
Cards. Yeah, and like
right?
yeah, when they
And
were setting
she's
up
like
camp.
yelling because there's like animals or something coming up or whatever,
Yeah, like a bunch of like monkey. Like,
and
there's a
she's like,
monkey there.
Indy, do something about this, and Indy's just like, what card do you have? Hey, okay, he's completely
Yeah.
ignores her, and I'm like, that's exactly the right attitude to have with a chick like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's amazing because you see that Indy's not responding to her. Like, okay, he responds to her at the part where they're in the temple, and he wants to sleep with her that night, right?
Yeah.
And she becomes the little feminine thing. But contrast it to Marion, where like him and her are always engaging at full capacity with each other.
Yeah.
But with Willie, he ignores her most of the time because he knows that her aura, her demeanor is bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, I found her insufferable. I think it kind of ruined the movie for me a little bit. That being said,
Actually, I want to mention one more thing. I do say that the actor, Kate Capshaw, I still did a good job for playing like the kind of screaming.
yeah,
character.
I don't blame the actor. I blame the character. Let's
Yeah,
just put it that
definitely.
way. Okay, is there what? Okay. So
Another great
I think
character,
this is one thing we disagree with. Another, the Kali Ma guy. I forgot his name. Shar
Molaram, like the main
Malaram.
guy.
Yeah, I think is my least favorite villain. And even to be honest, like the whole setting of this movie is my least favorite. It's my least favorite of the
It's very
Indiana
dark and
Jones movies.
claustrophobic, right?
Well, it's not even that. I'm just not as interested in the whole like religious cult in the middle of the thing. It wasn't a bad movie. I'm just saying it's my least favorite.
Yeah, I also rate it as my least favorite. They're still definitely redeeming colors, but I think one of the things is I don't think the MacGuffin is nearly as strong as Raiders. I think the Ark of the Covenant is much better than the
Yeah,
Shankara
because
stones.
the MacGuffin in this one is the Shankara stones,
Yeah, I don't personally find it
and
as
they
interesting.
kind of bring if you have one, like let's say in an area, it brings
Life, but I don't
life.
think it's like the stakes aren't as high as
So
the Ark.
what happens if they get all the Shankara stones?
That's the problem. They basically said once we get all the 5 Shankara stones, the Thuggies will be all powerful. That they don't really talk into. I
Oh,
guess
so
they
it
talk about.
wasn't like they don't summon some
Yeah,
god or something, or
they mentioned what's it called? Like we will take over the Christian God, and all of those will be down, and Kalima will be #1. But I just don't. They never really specify
do
how
they
the
say
stones
like
affect
it
that. They don't. They
summons
don't.
Kalima in the world,
They
or
don't really. I guess I think maybe I think it's intended, but they don't really get into it. Um, and I think it's the threat is, and because they don't get into it, the threat isn't as much. Like the arc, it's like if the
Yeah,
Nazis
yeah,
get,
that's
they're
what
gonna
I
take away
felt.
the Earth.
The stakes aren't as high, right? I didn't really
Yeah,
care. In the Lost Ark, the Nazis getting the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is this item that supposedly has immeasurable power,
yeah,
right? And
they
then
can
the
speak to
Nazis
God with
getting it. I
it.
mean, the Nazis were after the world, right?
Yeah.
They were after everything. So it's like them getting it just could be a game changer for everything. But this, it's
Well,
just like some little temple and some caves, and
I also think I like I think Molaram is the most memorable character because it's Kalima. It's such like a
yeah, yeah.
memorable thing.
We say it all the time, right? Kalima.
Yeah,
We make
it's
fun
he's
of it.
definitely not as good as Belloc because Belloc was good because while the Nazis wanted the Ark for power, Belloc was a genuine archaeologist and he had interest in these items.
Yeah.
So
So
I think it's
he's
more interesting.
like Indy's actual
Yeah,
nemesis
yeah,
because
he
they're
does.
both
He's like
archaeologists, so they both understand each other on that level.
yeah. It would just take it would just take a nudge for Indiana Jones to be like Belloc. He says to push you out of
Okay.
the light.
Was there anything else? I think we talked
Short
about the
round. We got to talk
stones.
about short
Okay.
round.
Yeah. No. Now let's talk about the best aspects of Temple of
Okay.
Doom, which for me was Short Round. I think Short Round was an amazing character. I loved him. He was funny. He was brave. He was badass. I just I think it's they did a huge disservice by not having him in more of the movies. I was very
Yeah.
disappointed in that. But yeah, he was fantastic. The chemistry between him and Indy, I
It's
thought
great.
was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
I
they're really
love their
close, man.
relationship. I love how they quip each other sometimes, but then
Mm.
when things get tough, they have each other's backs, and
And I love when Indiana Jones talks to Shorty in Chinese. I kind of like that. You know what I mean? It's like a
yeah.
small little thing, but I like it. And they
Oh,
were really
actually,
close.
that's another thing. I thought the intro to Temple of Doom was the weakest. I didn't really enjoy it that much.
It's certainly unique, isn't it? Like the the
You
nightclub.
know what? Honestly, it felt James Bondsy, and
Oh,
I
with the white
think
suit, right? He was wearing like the white suit, like
yeah,
James
and
Bond would
he's in
wear.
like he's in a classic Bond setting, right? It's like a kind of a nightclub where high end people meet
Yes,
up,
Club Obi-Wan nightclub.
and it's to me, it's just kind of like don't try and copy something. Don't base your movie off something else. Be your own thing. That's what
Yeah,
Raiders of the
definitely.
Ark did amazingly, and I think Temple of Doom sort of got soft and weakened, and maybe there was like some production. The production company kind of
Oh,
pushed in, and be like, we want you to be the American, you know, the American version
actually,
of.
listen, I will give it credit. It definitely doesn't try to duplicate Raiders in the Lost Ark. It definitely, I respect that. It tries to be extremely different and not try
Mhm.
to capitalize on the success. I respect that a ton. But even Steven Spielberg also hated this movie. Like he
Oh,
was not
oh,
happy with this at all. But he basically said that ultimately when George Lucas, it's his, he came up with the series. I'm gonna do the thing that he wants. You know.
yeah, yeah,
Um, it, he certainly didn't really want to do a horror. This is almost like a horror. Some people consider this like a horror movie in some
yeah.
sense.
So what was the controversy?
Basically, the controversy is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Although it had gory scenes like the ending, for majority of the movie, it was definitely more lighthearted than Temple of Doom, and a lot of kids enjoyed Raiders. You know, kids in my around my age who watched it, right?
Hmm.
Maybe even a bit younger, like 10. So this movie initially was gonna have a PG rating, right?
Hmm.
And all the kids were watching it, and parents got pissed off because of it's pretty horrific in some scenes, like the
Yeah,
heart getting ripped
okay.
out.
Let's the heart getting ripped out. You have kids in slavery.
Yeah,
I remember when I was a kid watching it, like it kind of flashed in my head because I was kind of like, holy shit, there's like kids being enslaved out there. I think that's one thing that made it like as an adult, I didn't like it as much, but when I was a kid watching it, I had that tension that I felt like the stakes were high because I'm like I'm a
like
kid.
you're a
What if
kid,
I was a
yeah,
kid, there? As an adult, it didn't really matter as much
yeah.
for me. But
So because of this controversy, Steven was like, "Can we get it?" They didn't want it to have an R rating, right? They didn't want to do that.
mhm.
I think that's obviously too far for an Indiana Jones movie. So what? There's no in between. Can we have something like PG-13? So they invented PG-13
So
for this
PG
movie.
13 got invented specifically because of Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, okay.
And after this, Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull are both rated PG-13, even though I think they're more lighthearted than the previous two.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so the signature scenes, we already talked about the heart scene. You know,
Yeah.
the when he pulls the guy's heart out. I think another scene that you specifically love and you mention all the time is when Indy's punching the guy and it shows Short Round punching the guy at the same
Yeah.
time.
So short run kind of not completely mirrors him, but there's definitely like he kind of looks up to Indy, right? And there's a great scene where Indiana Jones is fighting a thuggy guy, and finally Indiana Jones gets the guy, he's beating up with him. The camera pans to the right, then we see Short Round beating up a little kid, right? They mirror each other. And what's greater is John Williams, the composer for all four movies and the fifth as well, um, created his own theme for Short Round. So whenever Short Round did something heroic, it'd play that theme, just like how Indiana Jones would do something, anything heroic, his
Yeah,
theme would play.
that's great. I
So
love
they
that.
mirror each other really, really well. I
How
love the
old
scene.
was Short Round's character supposed to be?
He was around like 10 years old.
10 years old. Eh? Yeah, yeah. He was fantastic, man. He was smart. He was funny.
Like he was
I
around
just
like
loved
I
it.
think he was like 11, I believe, since it took place 1935. So he was pretty young, but a great scene, which I
And
love.
what? Sorry, what's the part? You know where Indy's like he's under control of the thing. What
Yeah, yeah.
snaps
So
him out of it?
basically, what happens is Indiana Jones, Mola forces Indiana Jones to drink this blood, which puts him in the sleep of the Kalima. Basically, it makes him evil and becomes like he follows the cult and becomes evil. Then Shoran grabs a torch at one point, and then
Hmm.
he puts fire on like the stomach of people, and that breaks him out of the curse.
Is that how he breaks Indiana Jones up?
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, he actually has to. But he's like, Indy, I
Uh,
love you, and then he burns him, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right.
And there's a great scene which I love is there's a slowed version of the Indiana Jones scene, like a slowed version of the theme.
Uh-huh.
And then Indy puts on Short Round's hat, and then Short Round puts on Indy's hat. They put it on each other, which it's just like
So
again,
wait, Short Round puts Indiana Jones's hat on Indiana Jones.
yeah, yeah. And their
Uh,
themes interlap. It starts out as the Indiana Jones
oh,
theme, and it turns
that's
into the Short
cool.
Round
That's
theme.
cool. Is
So,
there ever a scene where Indy puts his own hat on Short Round? I can't remember.
no, there isn't.
There
Actually,
isn't.
there is. He doesn't put it on him, but there is a scene where Short Round's wearing it as like a little funny
Oh,
thing.
okay, okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, we're done. I think we're done. Temple of Doom. Unless there's any other scene you want to mention.
I'd say no, I think that's it. You know what I mean? I'd say not as strong as Raiders, but still, I think a solid sequel. If I was showing the series to a group of friends, I wouldn't leave it out. I would still
Okay,
show it to them.
yeah, yeah. I know I wanted to skip it, but we ended up watching it anyway, and I'm happy that we watched it because I got to see Short Round and you
Yeah.
know the. But let's move on to the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I think is my favorite. I think for me, my two favorites are Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Last Crusade.
Which is it's very
Um,
controversial. Don't worry, I like we'll get
yeah,
to it. But
and I I love Raiders of the Last Ark, but like just Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just beat it out for me by a bit. So, and I know a lot of people are gonna hate on me for that, but
yeah,
let's
yeah,
so
no,
let's just talk about let's focus on Last Crusade. We'll
yeah.
get to Crystal Skull. So anything
Worst
in the movie,
aspects.
the worst aspects, anything that you think could have been done better, that was missing, that
Let me think. You know what? I don't know.
who's the
Again,
female lead in this one?
Elsa.
Ah,
The
the
reason
yeah yeah
she turns out to be a Nazi. I guess
the
spoilers.
Nazi chick.
Right? But I get the reason why they did that is basically Sean Connery is such a major role in this movie that they couldn't have her. She kind of replaces a female lead.
So
So the
okay,
female lead isn't the main character.
do you think that they kind of were copying Raiders a bit by using Nazis again? Do you think they shouldn't have done that?
Well, the reason, okay, here's the thing. Temple of Doom was so controversial to the point where the thing is when you make a new movie, you're always gonna have fans angry when you make a sequel. Either
Hmm.
if you make it too similar, like if you capture the spirit of the last movie, people are gonna say you copied it. But if you do it completely different, fans are gonna get angry if it goes too far, right? So they did definitely played it safe with Last Crusade. There's a lot of old elements back. The even the chase, the tank chase is kind of like an upgrade. This is basically an updated version of Raiders, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
The
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
a
I
Christian
just think
artifact, right? Like a
my
Christian based
for
artifact.
me the Last Crusade, what was missing from it is Marion and Short Round.
You
That's
like
it.
those characters back,
Everything
yeah.
else I thought was fine. If I think if it had those two characters in there, I think it would have been the perfect movie.
Yeah. That being said, there's some great aspects. I'm glad Sala was back. You know, it's great to see him.
Yeah, Sulla's a side character who's fantastic. He's got a bunch of flair to him. He's got a big family, and you could tell he considers Indy like a lifelong friend. Like he's gonna
Oh yeah,
back
they
him
do.
no matter what.
Yeah, I actually read a novel when I was a kid. It was a long time ago. When I was like around like 11 or 12, I rented it from the library at my school,
Mhm.
and it basically the novel showed Indiana Jones and them meeting. It's a bit fuzzy on
How
the
old was
details.
he when he met
Dude,
when they met?
I would be honest, man. I read it when I was young.
Hmm.
You know when you have to choose a book to help you read as a kid when
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
really young?
yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those books, right?
Okay,
So
okay,
yeah, the details are fuzzy, but they did meet in that book when they were young kids, which I think is cool.
nice.
Um,
Okay,
which other-
so some of the best aspects of the Last Crusade,
I really
obviously,
love the opening.
Indy's
Actually, we'll get to
dad,
that. We'll get to the opening. Yeah, yeah, we have to talk about Indy's dad. Indy's dad, I think, is a great addition. I think he's a
Sean
really cool
Connery,
character. Sean Connery.
who he passed away not too long ago. Very sad,
Unfortunately.
but
Yeah.
fantastic actor, and
I think he did a really good because I think what the thing is I think everyone when they heard Sean Connery's playing Indiana Jones' dad, also that's actually metaphorical because James Bond was a little bit of the inspiration for the character.
yeah, yeah. So you have a guy who actually played James
Yeah,
Bond
which I
in
think
the
is
movie.
kind of cool. I think a lot of people were in that Sean Connery is going to be like a this big action, you know what I mean, guy in the movie. But you know, he's kind of
I That's what I was
jumped up,
expecting. I was
right?
expecting like a more badass like version of Indy,
Yeah, it's definitely not like that. He's
and we
kind of
got
like
more of the academic version. Like you see all of Indy's academic influence came from his father,
yeah.
right?
So
And then the intro that you were talking about before, we
I
see
love it.
Indy as a kid,
I think it's such a
and
great
we
idea.
see
Yeah,
him get
much like
influenced
that.
by that guy who, and that's like sort of the action influence of Indy's character is
Yeah.
that character.
So
So we
using
see
the ground.
the two major male influences of Indy's lives in this movie.
Yeah. I think another really strong element of this movie was I really like the Holy Grail. I think it's definitely an upgrade from
That's why
the
I
first
like
one.
it too. I love the story and the lore behind the Holy Grail. I think it's very interesting and it's very cool because I find it more interesting than the Ark of the Covenant, to be honest,
For me, they're on
because
par. But the reason why I love this so much is because his dad has been searching it for his whole life. So
so it's a
there's
legacy thing. It's like
yeah,
continuing a family tradition almost.
definitely. I think again. There's more impact. The fact that his dad has grown up. This is his life's work to find this artifact. So when
But
he
let
does find it, the payoff is even better. I think.
Yeah, yeah, because we even learned that it was a cause of tension between Indy and his dad because
Yeah.
his dad
So
wanted to focus on that after
never
their
focus
mom
on Indy.
died, right? And talk a little bit about that.
So basically, when Indy's mom died, you know, his dad basically didn't focus him on him at all. You know, he was basically he says that he taught him self reliance. He never
Hmm.
told him to go to bed. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Stuff like that. So, but the way Indy saw it was, you just weren't there in my life. You saw people who were dead for hundreds of years more interesting than your own kid. So
Yeah,
when they
that's
first
real.
meet
That's
each
harsh.
other, yeah. So when they first meet each other, there's this kind of tension between them. So and there's always a tension throughout the whole movie, right? So when the end, when they finally reconcile with each other, the payoff's great. Um, they
And
find each other and as just as much, if not even more than finding the Grail. It becomes more important.
yeah, because what happens at the end? Do we have a scene where Indy lets go of the Grail?
Yeah. So basically, throughout the movie, Sean Connery's character, Indy's dad always calls him Junior,
Yep.
because instead of Indiana Jones. But at the very end of the movie, when Indiana
Because of
Jones,
course Indiana is not his real name.
yeah, he named after his dog, right?
So
But Indiana Jones,
Indy essentially took that, his real name's Henry. He took that name because do we ever
he
find
grew
out?
up with that. Actually, I think it's because he had so much fun with that dog when he was growing up.
He just loved that dog so much that he wanted to
Yeah,
continue.
yeah,
Okay,
it
okay.
was showing of happiness, right? So at one point, the Grail falls down a ravine at one point, and it's on a piece of stone. And Indiana Jones falls, and he's getting hanged. His one of his hands are getting hanged on by hung from his dad, and he's reaching for the Grail. He's trying to reach it, and he's slipping, and his dad finally calls him Indiana for the first time. And Indiana
but before
Jones,
that, he's telling him to leave the Grail, right?
yeah, he's telling him
But
Indiana, let it go.
Indy's sort of still
Like,
wants to
Junior,
grab it.
give me your hand. And he says Indiana, and his face kind of changes. He's realizing, and what that represents is, I think, when him finally calling him Indiana is him accepting his son. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
for doing all the crazy stuff that he did. And he says, "Let it go," and he gives him his other hand. The music's great. He lifts him up, and it's just one of the best and most emotional scenes in the entire series, and it's great.
Yeah, and the thing that makes this scene so much more interesting is actually that, because at the beginning, doesn't Indy have to sort of get pushed on this quest? Because he's not really interested in it, but then he finds out that his dad's in trouble.
Yeah,
Right?
he doesn't do it for the Grail. He's basically just doing it to find his father.
To find his father, right? And then he kind of gets pulled into it, and it's very interesting how by the end of it, he's more,
He wants to get the Grail.
he
instead
wants
of his
it
own
more than his father. His father's like, you know what, just leave it. It's not worth it at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to see that inverse happen. Because
Yeah.
I think for Indy it's kind of like, my childhood with my father got sacrificed because of
This item, this cup.
because of this item. It's like I need to get it, and Indy's dad is kind of telling him like, no,
His dad sees
it's
the
our
opposite.
bond, it's our actual bond that we have together that's really more important.
Yeah, like the way they see the cup by the end is completely opposite. Like you mentioned, Indy sees the cup as, this is the reason why me and my father never talked. I need to get this for him. But his dad sees the cup as, this is the item that stopped me from seeing and with my son, stopped me from
He almost has a realization about it.
yeah, he realizes that I've lost most of my life with my son because of this cup. It's not worth it.
Yeah, see, that's powerful. That's some powerful themes going on in the movie.
Yeah.
It's another reason that we say that these movies have heart. There's a power to them, and especially movies that deal with the father-son relationship. I think a lot of that is very important, and it's something that doesn't get done too much, or if it does get done these days, it's criticized.
Yeah.
But
signature moments or signature scenes.
Yeah, some signature. We touched on a lot of them.
Yeah, I
do want to say, before we get to that, I didn't like the female lead too much in this one.
Yeah, I don't think she was the main theme, so it doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, she was like I think the father-son relationship was more on point, and
yeah.
So
I feel like it'd be good to have Marion.
Too bad they didn't have Marion. I think it would have been.
I love to see his dad. It'd be kind of funny if them ganging up on Indy. You know what I mean? Like they're just talking shit about Indy.
But I know. That would have been great. So some iconic scenes.
I love the opening of this movie. I love the opening to this movie. I think it works really well.
Which is Indy as a kid. We see some backstory.
Oh boy. Yeah, I love River Phoenix as Indiana Jones as a kid. I think he really nailed it. Like he got the smirks down. You know what I mean? Like the kind of like crooked hair.
What do we learn about Indy from this
basically shows
scene?
We learned quite a bit about Indy this one day. So number one is we're introduced to this guy who is uncovering the Cross of Coronado. This legendary artifact.
This guy, he's essentially
a grave robber.
He's a grave robber. He's kind of like a badass maverick kind of character. He just wants
to take it and sell the item basically. And he's also wearing the fedora. He's got the jacket. He's got the same pants. It's basically Indiana Jones shaped the look of off this guy. Like you meant, he's kind of like he's basically a representation of Indiana Jones' adventure side.
Yeah, and what we actually see, right, is I think. Well, actually, let me mention that when we get to the end of talking about the scene. So keep going with it.
So basically, eventually, Indiana Jones tries to takes the cross to put it in a good museum, take it away from them. A chase ensues.
So he steals it from this
them,
grave robber guy.
Yeah. So then a chase ensues where Indiana Jones is on a horse and he jumps onto a train to get away.
Essentially,
from
we're saying he's already willing to has that sense of adventure.
He already has that admiration for these artifacts.
And oh yeah, and the admiration for the artifacts as well. Yes, that's right. He has almost like an honor system when it comes to ancient artifacts,
Yes.
and we can say that's an influence from his father's
Yeah.
upbringing.
So we see this chasing scene. They're on top of a train, and at one point, Indiana Jones falls through one of the what's it called? One of the parts of the bus, or not the bus, the train. And when it's a circus train, by the way. Then he sees a lion, right? The lion comes towards him. He has to defend himself. He finds a whip on the wall, uses the whip for the first time. Actually, cool little details. He hits himself in the chin. And in real life, Harrison Ford has
Oh, and that's where he
the
gets the scar from.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
okay, yeah,
So, and then the guy is like, the guy see Indiana Jones stuck in this part of the train, and it's like, toss up the whip. He tosses it up, and they let him out, right?
yeah. Hmm.
So we're already starting to see respect. This older guy has respect for Indiana Jones. He wants to save him. You know what I mean? It's not like just give us the cross and we'll leave you down
Yeah,
there. You know?
he's not like some grave robber guy
Yeah.
who's like completely evil or anything.
Yeah,
He's
he's
just.
got a heart of gold ultimately, right?
Hmm.
But anyway, Indiana Jones runs off with the what's it called, with the cross again, and then at one point he hides in a box, like there's a magic room, like a kind of for kids in
Hmm.
the train, and then at one point he hides in a box, right? And the guy's like, get out of the box, and it turns out there's like a little like leaving system, right? And Indiana Jones runs out the train. He leaves the train, right? And he runs away, and one of the scenes I love is the guy sees Indiana Jones running away with the cross, right? Instead of chasing him or anything like that, he just smiles at he just says "damn" and smiles at Indiana Jones. I love that.
It's kind of like he's acknowledging that he got outplayed.
Yeah, he got outplayed. I think he
But
sees a little
before
bit of
that
himself in
happens,
it.
doesn't something happen that develops a deep fear?
Oh yes. So at one point they're in the circus train and they're crawling through the reptile section, and Indiana Jones falls through, and there's a giant snake that appears. Indiana Jones falls into a basket of snakes, and that develops his phobia of snakes,
His
right?
extreme
The
phobia of
the
snakes,
iconic
where it's like,
phobia, right?
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, Indiana Jones with the cross runs back to his house. The guys ultimately track him down, right? And they come down. They take the artifact back, and before they leave, the guy says, "You know, you lost today, kid, but it doesn't mean you have to like it." And he puts his hat on Indiana Jones's head, lowers it down, and we get an amazing transition from young Indy to Harrison Ford.
To Harrison Ford Indy, and yeah, that was fantastic. And I think a lot of what the character development that's happening in the scene, besides the obvious stuff like him using the whip or him what's it called, having the fear of snakes, but essentially he has this relationship with his father. Now, has his mom died at this point?
Yes, his mom is
His
gone.
mom died.
Yeah.
So I think what we have is we have this character Indy, right, who his mom's died and his father is sort of regressing into his academic work. So obviously Indy's already got this respect for academia, this respect for archaeology from his father, but he's now being exposed to the fact that it's not everything. Like what he's missing from his father, right? He's developing this emptiness, and all archaeology is almost the cause of that. And so I think Indy, he wants to find something. He doesn't want to be like his father in that way, and he wants to find something that's going to set him apart. And I think that's where the adventure maverick grave robber character has an imprint on Indy's character, where he's like, no, you got to have the archaeology and you got to be engaged with the world. You got to, you can't just regress like his father did. You have to be engaged with the world. You have to have the adventure. And I think that's a pivotal moment in Indy's development where he realizes that and he develops himself as that person going forward.
Well said. Well said.
So
All
another
right.
signature scene from this movie is the tank scene.
Yeah, again. So I kind of how we mentioned that this movie is like a refined version, like a bigger version of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of goes with the tank chase. I think they kind of they're kind of familiar with each other, which is Nazis are taking over it. They're going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it also takes place in like a desert, drier area climate, right?
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
kind of somewhat mirror each other.
And
Like
it's
Indiana Jones
cool.
on a horse as well.
Who the hell doesn't like a tank? And yeah, it's like Indy on his horse taking on a tank by the it mirrors Indiana Jones almost by himself with a few friendly characters taking on the Nazis
Yeah.
as powerful force, right?
What's so well done about it is it shows both his like his not grave, but like his adventurous side
The
and his
Maverick side.
smart side. Which is what I mean is he's pretty smart with everything. Number one is he grabs a rock and he puts it in the tank barrel. I love that. I love when he's smart like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Even when
he
he's
he
not using his
uses
fist, he's
little
smart.
intelligent things to sort of get
Yeah.
himself ahead.
Then at one point, Indy jumps in the tank, fights off a bunch of Nazis. It's great. It's a great set piece.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved, like, I was so, one of my favorite scenes is the tank goes over and Indy climbs up and they're all looking and they're sad and he's like kind of wondering what they're looking at.
Yeah,
Like
what the
I
fuck?
was laughing at that part. It was just fantastic. Because then they see Indy and they're like, "Oh shit, you're alive."
Yeah, and I love like when his dad and him hug as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great fantastic movie. Like I said, they're just missing Shorty and
Marion.
Marion. Is there any other scenes you can think of?
I think we covered the final
Yeah,
scene
we
pretty well.
covered the final scene where Indy and his dad have the
But
thing. And
I think
what about the Grail? Let's the last thing we'll talk about is the Grail part. Like I really loved how the Grail was
yeah,
like the simple cup, and you have that Knights Templar who's there defending it. Like that was very cool.
over 700 years. Yeah, it's great. So basically, they finally reached the Ark. Um, both the Nazis and Indiana Jones are in. No, not the Ark. The Grail. Sorry, they both are at. They see the Grail. They don't see it, but they're in the temple, and one of the main bad guy, Donovan, shoots Indiana Jones's father, right?
Hmm.
And he's bleeding, he's about to die, and basically he says the only way to save your father is you have to uncover the Grail and heal him with it. So you're going to uncover it.
Yep.
So Indiana Jones has to go through the three trials, which are three different sections of where that are tests on uncovering the Ark. So the first is kneeling before God. You have to kneel before God, or else your head gets cut off. At one point, a blade comes out. Then it's the Word of God. You have to step. There's basically a bunch of tiles, and each tile has a letter on it, and you have to
Hmm.
spell the name of God to go forward. And then the final one is the one of my probably my favorite one is there is a huge gap between Indy and the next room. There's a huge gap, like almost an abyss below them, and you have to basically what Indy thinks is there's no bridge. It's a leap of faith. You have to step forward and assume that something will appear. So it's basically testing out Indy's faith. You know what I mean?
Yep.
His you know what I mean? What he's
And
willing to go
I
through.
like how they did that one because it's not like there's like this invisible bridge, but
It's
it's
just
like it.
perspective.
Yeah, it's just perspective. It's like you just
Really
need a.
well done.
Very cool. Very cool.
So eventually he goes through and he makes it to the final room, the Grail room, and there's a knight who's been guarding the Grail for over 700 years, and basically what happens is the Nazis also come with Indy at one point. The Nazis come in. Well, not the Nazis, Donovan and Elsa. So they're like, there's a bunch of grails on the table. There's a bunch of different cups, and they have to figure out which is the right grail. And it turns out if you choose the wrong holy grail, it will actually kill you.
Hmm.
So Donovan ends up choosing the wrong one. He chooses the really golden looking cup. You know what I mean?
The one that looks most impressive.
Yeah, most impressive. There are jewels on it. It's gold, and he drinks from it, and he ages within a few seconds. Because the Grail gives you eternal life, this does the complete opposite. It takes you from you in like in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
It turns into a skeleton. Pretty again. You know what I mean? For an Indiana Jones movie, there's always some sort of creepy death.
Yep.
But Indiana Jones has to choose a cup, and he knows it can't be made from gold. The cup is made from a carpenter, and he chooses the most basic looking cup on the table.
Yeah.
Right? It looks like a clay cup, and he drinks from it, and it turns out it's the right Grail.
Yeah, because it's
He's
about
chosen
having
wisely.
humility, right?
Right?
Whereas
Yes,
most
it's about being
superficial
humble.
people would think, oh, the most beautiful, the most amazing
Yeah, it's
cup, the
the Holy
heaviest
Grail,
cup,
right?
whatever, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a
Yeah.
smart little thing.
Fantastic movie. Okay.
And one more thing I want to
Oh,
mention
okay.
is so basically, the movie ends. They get the Grail falls down. The chasms, and Indiana Jones and his dad are reunited. Everything's good, and they ride off into the sunset. Right, great ending. I think it's a great ending shot. And many years pass. There's no Indiana Jones movie until 2008. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls come
Kingdom
out.
of
Now,
the Crystal Skull, the great
the most
divisive movie.
controversial, right? The most controversial movie in the entire series.
The movie that split the fans down the
Yes.
middle. So
So
I think our consensus is that we both like it.
I like Crystal Skull. I listen. I think a lot of people grew up with only the three indie movies because there
Hmm.
was a big gap between this and the fourth. I grew up with all four, watching all four, so I loved all four of them almost equally. You know, I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's unique. It doesn't try to like go with the whole Christian sort of thing again. It goes with aliens,
Does
which I
something
think
new,
it,
yeah, yeah.
but
And
it's still it's nostalgic and it brings a lot of
it
old
uses
stories in.
some extra CGI, which
Yeah,
I
but I don't
actually
mind
like.
that. Yeah,
I like the new, the improved graphics and stuff. I'm a big fan of doing good CGI.
yeah.
Uh,
So first, let's talk about the worst aspects. What are the worst aspects of this movie?
okay. Okay, let's first talk about what our personal things we didn't like. Oh no, let's talk about what the
The
community
fans.
doesn't like. What
Okay,
a lot of the fans
there's
don't like.
a list. So number one is CGI. They didn't like the fact that this movie uses CGI.
Okay.
Stuff like green screen. They didn't like the aliens. They didn't like the fridge
Yeah,
scene.
aliens were a big problem for a lot
Yeah.
of people, I think. Which
Uh,
I
the
don't really understand why.
yeah. The fridge scene probably the most
But you know
controversial
what?
indie.
We're gonna talk about aliens later, so we'll save
Yeah.
that. Yeah, the fridge scene, which a lot
And
of people
then
were pissed off about.
the monkey scene in Shia LaBeouf.
I think the monkey scene
The
is
monkey
the
scene,
only
yeah.
thing that I would personally say was
Yeah,
like
they went too far.
cringe.
I think the reason why they tried to do it was they basically Steven Spielberg not only wanted to reunite fans of the series, they wanted to pass it down to their kids as well for
Yep.
people who never grew up with any. So I guess they try to appeal to the younger age. And when I was a kid, I was fine with it.
Hmm.
But as an adult, it's pretty cheesy.
Yeah.
And I would have but like again, it only lasts for like it lasts for like
Yeah,
15
it's a
seconds,
tiny scene. It's a tiny scene.
so it's not a big deal.
I honestly I don't care about the nuclear scene. I actually thought that
That was fine.
I think when I first watched it, I had a problem with it. When like I watched Crystal Skull in theaters and I was like, "Oh, here we go," right? But when I watched it recently, I honestly didn't care and actually I thought it was pretty cool that
Oh, I thought it was sick,
they
man.
put in a nuclear explosion, and Indy has to go through and he's going through the town and it's like this fake town and he doesn't realize it
Yeah,
at
the
first. Like
mannequins and
it's
stuff.
very
And I
yeah,
love
it's
like
very
his
cool.
outfit compared to all the houses. He looks so out of place, and I think it's sick.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And a lot of people complain about CGI, but there's a great use of miniatures in this scene where all the houses get blown up.
Yep.
That was practical. Grant, a
There
great
you go.
use of
It
it.
was a mix. They put CGI
Yeah,
where they
they
needed
put
to,
some
and
CGI to make it
they
look
kept
like a
the
little bit like more like misty.
yeah,
But like the house is getting blown up, that was all practical. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think it was great.
Okay, so let's talk about Shia LaBeouf.
I think he's a lot of fun in this
How do
movie,
you say
man.
it? How do you say his name?
Shia LaBeouf, I think, is the
Shia
proper way.
LaBeouf. I like to call him Shia LaBeouf.
All
And
right.
I've been watching Shia LaBeouf since the show Even Stevens on the Family Channel, and so I really I liked him in Transformers.
Yeah.
So I never really had a problem with him.
No, no,
Being in
he's
the Kingdom
he's
of
a
the
bit
Crystal
odd in
Skull.
real life, right? He's a bit odd in real,
He's
but I
definitely
think
an odd character in real life, but as an actor, I thought he was fine. I never had a problem with him.
you know
I didn't have a problem with his character. What's his character's name?
Mutt Williams.
Mutt
Well, actually,
Williams, right?
it's technically Mutt
Mutt.
Jones, but we found it out later.
So Mutt, yeah, I never had a problem with Mutt's character. I thought he was fine. I liked the interplay between Indy and him.
I love the fact that also I think when this came out, some fans were skeptical, like, oh, he's gonna be like, oh, since Indiana Jones is old now, they're gonna make him better at everything. But it turns out he's not that character.
Yeah, I love how at the beginning there's some of that because he's got the motorcycle, right? He's telling Indy to get on the motorcycle. He's the one that's coming in and a little bit badass, right? He's got the knife and shit. But then as the movie progresses, and Indy sees, Mutt sees Indiana Jones as this stuffy old professor.
Right? Yeah.
And as the movie progresses, we see them getting into situations where Indy's actually the one who knows what's going on, and he's the
Yeah.
adventurous one, and he's pushing forward, and you see Mutt
Like
surprised and
getting
shocked.
scared at
And
times, like the
yeah,
scorpion, like he's getting scared and stuff, right? Like I love that, man.
exactly.
He's
So
still a
it
vulnerable
was a
character.
great thing because it was showing, it is a movie where Indy's a little bit older, and they kind of touch on that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But so they're showing that, yeah, okay, maybe he's a bit rusty, but when
He still got
when
it.
the shit hits the fan, he comes back. He's
Yeah.
back to being
Yeah.
classic Indy.
So another thing that a lot of people complain, I guess the
Oh, I just want to mention quickly. I still would have preferred short round
yeah, I think short run would have been cooler. Yeah.
for sure. I think yeah, the Shia LaBeouf's Mutt and Indy, their sort of chemistry. I don't think compares you to
Yeah.
short round in Indy.
Then this is like the big thing, which is aliens. Like
Mm-hmm.
people fucking shit on this movie because it have aliens. And listen, the reason why it has aliens is pretty interesting. So the previous three Indiana Jones movies took place in the 1930s, so they're supposed to replicate movies from the 30s. Um, this movie, since so much time had passed by, it takes place in 1957. So they're gonna make a 50 style movie in the 50s, not a 30 style movie in the
Yeah,
50s,
and what
right?
was big in at that time?
It was aliens,
Aliens. We have
aliens
Roswell,
invading.
New Mexico, right? All this stuff like that.
So I think it makes perfect sense, and it's not like it's complete aliens. It's not like it's like complete 50s. There's still some great. It still carries on that feeling of the previous movies, just mixing aliens with
I
humans.
had absolutely no problem with it whatsoever. I think Indiana Jones is sort of like the Indiana Jones movies are sort of like an environment for exploring interesting and sort of out there topics, right? We have the Ark of the Covenant, this mystical artifact. We have the Holy Grail, another mystical artifact. Temple of Doom, we have this religious cult that has
Yeah,
these magical powers, right? Aliens, I think, is just another logical step in that
yeah.
direction, in that same direction.
And it's not like they make aliens like super futuristic and stuff. They're still
Yeah, yeah.
like
It wasn't like
they,
there was some advanced city or
yeah.
something,
It
or
was.
some.
I like how they didn't make aliens are from the future. They're actually from our past. I think that's a good way to go. Like
Yeah,
they taught
I
us. They
think they did,
taught.
and it's almost like they incorporated the aliens into the architectural framework of
Of
of the architectural sort of
like they taught us
theme.
the basics of living. You know what I mean? That I think that's very interesting.
Yeah,
And
I liked
people
it.
believe in aliens too.
I thought bringing Marion in was
Great,
great.
great choice. You know, really good
Um,
choice.
I don't really like the fact that she had a kid with Indy and never told him. I think that was a little bit. I understand it's sort of like something that
It's that
needed
they
to be
fought,
done for
right?
the movie to make
Yeah.
the movie interesting. It's more of like a plot device, but didn't really sit well with me. I would have preferred that they did something with Short Round instead of bringing a new character. Even though I'm
Yeah.
I'm fine with the character. Um.
Um.
Okay, let's talk about some signature scenes.
There's all right. I loved the opening to this movie. Like the Area 50. I think the Area 50, the warehouse chase is so good, man.
Yeah, where
First
it
of
shows
the
all of
introduction.
the.
First, we have to talk about the reintroduction to Indiana Jones. You know, so many years have passed. How are we going to reintroduce this iconic character who's been cemented as an iconic action adventure legend?
Mhm.
So, and it's so first of all, Indiana Jones is brought out from the trunk of a car, that which is George Lucas's idea. You know, a very desperate situation.
Yep.
Um, and they're at Warehouse 51, and the Russians. We now have the communists instead of the Nazis because
Mhm.
it's the 50s, right? So the communists throw Indy's hat on the ground, right? And they
Yep.
throw Indy on the floor. Indy stands up. He grabs the fedora. We see the shadow, right? He puts on the hat, the music, dun, 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 da, da, da. The camera pans around, right? We see behind him, dun, 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 and we see him for the first time in so long. He says Russians. What a great way to reintroduce the character. Like, yeah, he's older, but he still got it.
Yeah, yeah, and then it's cool because we have this humongous warehouse that houses all these like different supposedly mystical artifacts and technologies and what
Yeah,
what I really liked is that they brought Indy there expecting Indy to like I guess know where it was, and instead of knowing where it was he came up with an idea to find it,
yeah,
right?
which
So
is
it
like
showed
highly
like
magnetic.
a little bit of intelligence there.
Okay, so he uses the gunpowder from the guns to find it. It leads them towards it. Then they find an alien inside of it. Then Indiana Jones, since everyone's
Or the
distracted
the
looking at the
yeah,
alien,
yeah,
the dead
that's right.
alien,
Yeah.
he starts a fight. You know, he grabs his whip and stuff, grabs a gun. right? Everyone's pointing his gun at him, and
He
this
gets
is
himself out of the situation, and then we have that iconic scene where he swings to get into the truck or the car, and he
yeah.
misses, I believe.
He misses the car, right? He just misses it, and he smashes back into the truck behind him, right?
Kind of showing like he's not as young as he once was,
Yeah,
you know.
but it's still like kind of sick. You know what I mean? I love that scene. It's like so
Mm.
satisfying seeing him use the whip again, right? And he
Yeah.
says, "Damn, I thought that was closer,
So
right?"
do you think a lot of indie fans who were watching the movie, and as soon as they opened up and showed the alien, you think they were all like, no.
I don't. The thing is, I think the true and like they're not true. I know there's some fans. You know what I mean? I talked. Looking on the old Indie 4 archive on some sites.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of fans who were like, "Yeah, this is probably gonna be aliens." Like
Oh, so
they know
they
that.
even guessed that it might be.
Yeah. So I think the fans who understood that this is not another Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is a new 50 setting. It's an entirely new decade. And it's got new elements in it. And you're not gonna have Raiders of the Lost Ark again. This is a different movie.
Yep.
And I think fans who knew that coming in liked it much more than fans who were expecting this is going to be another Indiana Jones adventure where he goes after some sort of golden artifact. You know what I mean? Kind of
Hmm.
just classic like that. There's a new element into it, which I think works really well. I also think a lot of people complain about again the green screen and stuff. There were a lot of great sets in this movie. That Area 51 chase,
Yeah.
that was a real set. Um, when the bar fight, you know what I mean, where they sort of bar fight when
Yep. Yep.
Indy and Mutt meet there. That was an actual set. And I love that motorcycle chase. Some great stunts in there. I love when Indy climbs into the car and
Yeah,
beats
and
the
they're
elevator.
very atmospheric with the like late 50s,
Oh, yeah,
early
they use
60s
their
kind of
time
vibe.
period really, really
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
We have the opening scene, which is like teenagers driving with Elvis playing. We have a bar fight with greasers and jocks. We've
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah. That was a funny
protests
one.
against the communists. Like they use their time period really. I think it probably makes the best use of its time period out of all the movies.
Yep.
So a lot of people don't
Um.
give it credit.
So another signature scene.
I
that-
think what's it called? I think should we discuss the updated chase? Because every movie has a main chase, right?
Mhm.
Raiders has truck. Temple of Doom's got the bridge and the mine carts.
Yep.
Last Crusade's got the tank, and in 4 we have a jungle
I
chase.
actually I enjoyed the chase, and I think
I thought it was cool.
I think you kind of see the evolution of making scenes a little bit more tense.
Yeah,
Especially in like, and even though they went a little bit unrealistic in some parts, like when I think there's one part where Mutt has both his feet, one foot on one car, one foot on the other,
yeah, like
right?
between the
Which I
two, right?
thought was it was pushing it a little bit, but I was like, oh, it's okay. You know, he's a fencer. Maybe he's got some extra
Yeah, they mentioned
skills.
earlier in the movie that he's great with a blade.
So
Like
I loved the sword fight. I thought the sword
a lot
fighting
of
was
people hate
awesome.
that scene. Actually, a lot of people think it's terrible.
No, I thought it was great.
I thought
I
it was
like
sick.
sword fighting. I think it's cool. I think they set it up. It's not like he just had that ability
Yeah,
to sword
we
fight.
see
They
he uses a
mention it.
blade throughout the
He
movie,
took
right?
fencing in school. He
And he
knows
has
how
a
to
blade
use
as
a
well,
blade. Yeah, exactly. So they
so it
set
works.
that up. So no, you can't say like where did that come from? No, we know that he can handle himself with a blade. And we know it from the villain character too, because she's always carrying that sword
Yeah,
around. They even, I think, at one point they even mention her as the woman carrying the sword or something,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
And
So
one thing I love about that scene is while they're having the sword fight, Indiana Jones kind of looks and smirks. You know what I mean? Like he's good on him for manning up and using
does
the
he
weapon.
know that it's his son at that point?
Yeah, he does. He knows. He
He
knows.
does.
Like
Okay,
he's
okay,
kind
that's
of
cool.
proud of him, right?
So it's actually what I find funny actually is how um Indy's kind of he's kind of giving his approval to the adventure maverick side, because remember how we talked about Indy has these two sides, his academic archaeology side and his maverick badass side, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Mutt has the badass maverick side but completely has none of the archaeology
Yeah.
side,
And he
and
gets pissed
because of
off.
that, yeah, I think we talked about it, even when we were watching the movie, right? We see Indy get pissed off. Not only that, he almost acts like his father,
Yeah,
in a way
beforehand, right?
towards Mutt, right? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So there's kind of a scene where it's like they're talking and like Mutt's saying like he quit a bunch of schools. He's like you know what I mean? He's like, I mean, listen, if it's useful. He's basically telling him school isn't all that bad. There's also another scene where Indiana Jones kind of gives him information It's like when the scorpion scene. Shy is getting scared by a bunch of scorpions, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then Indiana Jones is like, listen, when it comes to scorpions, the bigger the better. Small one bites. He's kind of showing him like, listen, having knowledge is actually legitimately helpful.
Yeah.
Um, Also, and then I think that the scene is hilarious. It's basically at one point Marion and Indiana Jones are in quicksand. Well, it's a dry sand pit that he says.
Yeah.
Um, they're in, and basically Indiana Jones is like, he's a good kid, all right. Maybe not everyone's cut out for school, but like, whatever. And then Marion's like, he's your son. And like the realization, like, oh shit, why don't you make him finish school? He gets all
Yeah,
angry and stuff, right?
he gets pissed off, right? Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that, man. It's such a hilarious scene.
So
And
let's talk. Oh, go on, go on.
I think we have to talk about the ending.
That's what I was gonna get to. Yes,
Yeah, right.
we gotta talk about. So we have the main villain, and the classic indie style. The villain gets undone by the thing that they were
Yeah,
chasing.
yeah.
She gets the knowledge, but it's too much, and it fries her brain essentially.
She disintegrates.
So and then we see the aliens. Their spaceship lifts off, and they're finally all together again, and they
He
leave the
calls
planet.
him Junior. It's Indiana Jones calls Mutt Junior, which I think is great.
Yeah, see another aspect of him becoming like his father.
Yeah, that's also good. There's a few lines that kind of show that he's grown a bit wiser. Don't get me wrong, he's still got his adventurous side, but since he's older, he kind of looks more on his academic side a bit more.
Hmm.
Like he says, this is intolerable, just like his dad, right?
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
motorcycle. There was also a motorcycle chase in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And after Indiana Jones takes down a guy in a motorcycle, he's laughing, and his dad kind of looks at him disapproving, right?
Hmm.
Same thing. The roles are reversed in the fourth movie. Um, Shia LaBeouf, Mutt is like laughing, and then Indiana Jones looks at him kind of disappointed.
Yeah,
He kind of mirrors his dad a little bit. I'm guessing that after Last Crusade, they kind of reconciled a little bit, so he got a little bit of his dad in him after
for
Last
sure, for
Crusade.
sure. He kind of accepted that
Yeah,
part of himself. And so let's now take it to one of my absolutely favorite scenes
yeah.
in the
Dude.
entire four movies is so what remind me what happens. The hat comes
Yes. So Indiana
to
Jones and
Mutt,
Marion
Shia
are getting
LaBeouf's
married.
character.
Yeah. So Indiana Jones and Marion are finally getting married. And while the thing is happening, eventually the wind opens the doors, right,
Hmm.
from the wedding place, and it blows the hat towards Shia LaBeouf's feet. Shia LaBeouf
Indy's
grabs,
classic hat.
yeah, Indiana Jones' classic brown, hat, and he's about to put it on, and at the last second, Indiana Jones grabs the hat back on and puts it on his head.
And it was so awesome the way because he walks by and as he's walking by he just nope and he puts it.
Yeah,
I think I cheered more for that scene than I did any other scene in the movie
yeah, definitely.
in all of the movies. It was just because you're just thinking like oh no like there's a new like Indy's time is over, but he just grabs it and it's almost like the George Lucas and the creators of the movie they felt that they knew that there was that tension of Indy passing on,
Yeah, definitely.
and they were
But
like, "No, Indy's still Indy," and I was like, "Yes."
yeah, good on them. I think they really respect their character.
And you know what? Speaking of hats, you just got your hat in the mail, correct?
That's true. Yeah. So I ordered I've always had like a few cheap indie hats from when I was a kid, right?
Hmm.
Things that cost like 20-30 bucks you get at a costume store. But even when I was like 5 or 6, I even noticed that these hats are really shitty made and they're not accurate to the movies.
So you wanted something that was like
Yeah,
legit.
legit. Well, after searching through a bunch of companies, I decided to go with a company called Advantage
Hmm.
Hats, and I decided to choose. Even though the hat is meant to be the same throughout each movie, there are slight differences.
Okay.
And I decided to go with the. Speaking about the wedding scene, I based my hat on that specific crease, like the way that hat looked in that specific scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
And
specifically got it like
so
that.
what's the material that they use again?
So, for the first three movies, it's rabbit felt, but for Crystal Skull, they used beaver felt, which is even stronger.
And your hat is made out of
Yeah.
what?
Yes, it is made out of that same beaver material, that Portuguese beaver felt,
Wow.
and
So
it's
so
beautiful.
how
I just
so
think
it was it came in a box. You open the box and
that's
when you put
there
your
it is.
hand on it for the first time, how did it feel?
Oh my god, it's like beaver is very dense
Hmm.
compared to cheaper felts, so it's extremely smooth, really
Oh,
fine.
nice.
Oh, and it's
Yeah,
great.
and so
Like I,
we'll put up a picture of the hat, so
I'll
of the
show them. I have
actual
a
hat, so
before and
people can
after
see.
photo, which is
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Okay. Great. Great. So let's. The podcast is running a little bit longer than we were expecting. So let's move on to the next Indiana Jones movie that's coming out. So recap for us what we know so far.
Okay, so around 2016, even before that, after Crystal Skull came out, even though we had mixed reactions, it still made a lot of money. It was that movie made the most money out of all four Indiana Jones, out of the previous installments. So they probably were planning on making another one. The actors kind of said Harrison was like, "Yeah, I'd be down to do another one." And eventually, 2016, they finally announced, confirmed after Disney bought Lucasfilm, we are going to make the fifth Indiana Jones movie, and Harrison Ford is once again going to be Indiana Jones. And for a good while, the movie kept on getting delays. First, it was supposed to be 2019.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously didn't happen. Then it was supposed to be for 2020. That didn't happen again. For 2021, but then COVID hit. Now it's 2022. But finally, basically for a really long time, the only information we knew was Harrison Ford was going to be Indiana Jones.
So
Again,
well, let's talk about that. Is Harrison Ford too old to be Indiana Jones?
I don't think so, man.
How old is
If
he now?
he is 78.
78. Wow,
I know that's old, but then you have to think
it's
again.
nearly
Like, have
four
you seen
decades old.
like Clint Eastwood? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's in his 90s, I'm pretty sure, and he still did great in his films. Um, and I think the right way to do this is what's it called? Don't have him like going under the truck or jumping on a tank
Like
level.
doing those insane moves that
Yeah,
20 something
but
year
like,
olds are
but
doing.
yeah, but like when he uses his mind, like remember when we mentioned where he grabs the rock and puts it in the barrel?
Mm-hmm.
When he does stuff like that, where there's a scene in Last Crusade where he grabs a flag. They're basically a motorcycle is chasing him. He grabs a flagpole and puts it into the wheel of it, and it causes it to flip over. When he uses his mind to win the fight, it's what it works. So, don't get me wrong. You can still have a few punches in there. You know what I mean? I was watching. We were watching Blade Runner 2049, and when he punched Ryan Gosling in the face, I was just thinking he punches
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
way.
He still had that like spring in his punch, you know, even
Yeah,
though he
so I
was
still think
looking
he can
older.
still, you know what I mean, do it. And I noticed the people they've casted are not in their 20s and 30s for the
They're
most part.
a little bit older too, right?
Yeah, a little bit older.
Well, let's segue into that. We know that we have some announced actors. I think we have four main ones.
Yes.
So the
So
first
uh,
one,
this is pretty. Like, this is really exciting to me because they haven't announced anything besides Harrison Ford being Indiana Jones for multiple years, and now all suddenly they announced three new cast members out of the blue, just like
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's right. So
Um,
let's talk about the first one,
Phoebe Waller-Bridge. They announced that not too
Phoebe
long ago.
Waller Bridge. Now, I and I think you agree have some reservations about this actress.
I am a bit
So
skeptical.
she's the main female lead, right? Is
Yes,
that what they
she
said?
is.
Yeah.
That's what they said. We don't know
So what
exactly
we
what she
know
is.
about her is she's done some voice work in other movies, and she's involved in the new 007 movie that's
Right. Yeah,
coming out.
she helped like add some like writing touches to it, I believe.
Yes, and she was handpicked by Kathleen Kennedy, who, as we all know, ruined
Doesn't
the
have to
Star
get.
Wars
Yeah.
franchise. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Um, and my main problem with her is the story we hear that in on the on the set of 007 we have they enforced this sort of rule that no one was allowed to say Bond girl. They weren't allowed to call her the Bond girl, the main
Right.
female lead. And apparently she was the one behind this. She was the one who was enforcing this. So what I'm nervous about with her being cast is essentially that, she's going to bring this feminist influence that seems to be plaguing a lot of movies in Hollywood these days. She's going to bring it into the indie movies, and I don't think if that happens, I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to ruin the whole movie.
Definitely. Also, so I assume she's gonna be the new sidekick, right? Like the main female lead. So she's gonna tag along with Indy, right?
Presumably. That I think that's we
If
can
that
assume.
happens, I just don't think we need that. I think that we should really bring back Shore. That's the smart thing
Yep.
to do.
Yep. Absolutely. That's what they should
We've
have done.
seen him in
And
a a previous movie, so we have context to his character. So him coming back. So let's say they do. This is Disney, all right. They spend so much money on both Star Wars and Indiana Jones. They're not going to make one more movie and that's it. They want to profit on this.
Hmm.
So it's kind of obvious they're going to want to pass the torch. And Sharon's the best candidate for this because he's been in a previous movie. So we know Shia LaBeouf isn't coming back. They
He
announced
would be the best candidate, but that's the reason why they're not going to choose him. They're going to
Yeah.
choose the character that's the most politically correct, which is we're going to replace Indiana Jones with a female. That's what they're gonna do. It's gonna be terrible. It's gonna ruin the series. I think I have when she got cast, when she got announced as the main female lead, for me it was just disappointing. Like I was just, my heart sank. I was like, I don't have much hope for this movie.
Yeah.
That's what I felt. So
I'm
we're
trying
gonna
to
see.
stay optimistic.
Maybe, I know you're a lot more optimistic about it than I am, but
Because I've been waiting for this movie to happen ever since I was 3 and said, "Where's the next one? Where's number 5?" And my dad said there is no number 5. I've been waiting this for a lot of my life.
so you
And
really want it to be good.
I want this movie. Even if it's the worst in the series, but if it's still a solid movie, I'm happy. Okay,
Hmm.
just do Indiana Jones justice. We don't really need this character to be bigger and better than everything that Indiana Jones does.
Yeah, yeah.
Like really, like they announced this is going to be the 5th and final Indiana Jones movie, presumably with Harrison Ford, right?
Hmm.
Give this guy some respect because he cares about this character.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think George
so
Lucas does too. So,
George Lucas, Steven Spielberg,
but we'll just see. In the end, it's going to be about who has the most influence over the movie,
yes,
and I think this is going to actually show us a lot about Disney, because it's going to show us who's really pulling the strings. If there's a lot of feminist thing, propaganda pushed in here, then we're going to know that Kathleen Kennedy really does have power behind what's going on at Disney and at Lucasfilm specifically. But if it
yeah.
stays true to indie, then maybe George Lucas and some of the other creators were able to, and Harrison Ford were able to hold on. So we'll see. We'll see. It's gonna be interesting.
Next they announced recently they actually
Thomas Kretschmann, I think that's who you say.
yes. I'm not really familiar with this actor at all, to be honest. I think he was in Ultron.
Yeah,
Avengers Ultron.
he was in in the Avengers movie. He was right at the beginning. He was in control of the Hydra base. He
I
was like
barely
the
remember him, to
commander.
be honest. Like I remember seeing his
Yeah,
face once.
I watched Ultron like maybe a week ago, so that's why he's very fresh in my memory. I think he'll be fine as like a side character, maybe one of the villains, like a side,
Yeah.
the
Again,
top
there's not
henchman of the villain, of the main
again
villain.
there's not really much known. Like again, they didn't really announce what role he's gonna have whatsoever. So again, he's just kind of like, all right, yeah, whatever. It doesn't really matter to me.
So now
But
let's
this,
talk about the most exciting
yes,
announcement.
Mads Mikkelsen. This,
Mads Mikkelsen. Well, he's a fantastic actor. I've loved him for a
Casino
long
Royale, he was great.
time. He was
Yeah,
Hannibal. He was in Casino Royale. He was Le Chiffre.
yeah, I think he
Um,
did really great.
Fantastic actor. I think I'm pretty sure he's Norwegian.
Yeah,
But so have they announced him specifically as the main
they haven't. But like
villain?
they haven't. But like, come on. Like,
Yeah, I think we can assume
his face just looks like that villainous character.
he does. He does.
And
He's gonna be fantastic.
if he is the villain, which I'm fairly certain he is, who knows? Maybe they'll you know what I mean, do something unexpected. But I'm fairly safe to say he's gonna be the villain. I think he's a great villain. He does such a good job, and he's so unique. And I think if he's the villain, this could possibly be the best.
I will
villain.
say Phoebe Waller-Bridge brought my hopes down. Mads Mikkelsen brought them back up.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm still skeptical, but I'm really excited for Mads to be
yeah, like he could potentially be the best villain in every Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah,
All-
absolutely, absolutely. I think he's gonna have a strong performance. He
And he's
always
older too,
delivers.
right?
Yeah, he always
But-
delivers fantastic performances, and I'm excited. So
Yeah, and another thing I noticed though is he's 55 years old, so he's fairly, he's up there, right? So I
Mhm.
think he's older. I think they purposely chose a slightly older guy. So I'm thinking he's gonna fight with Indy at one point, right? They're gonna try to make it
yeah,
fair.
I could see that. I could see that. It'd be interesting.
Also, this also brings me to an interesting. I think they don't say Harrison Ford is 78. I think. Listen, maybe I'm biased because I really looked up to Harrison Ford as a kid, but I think he looks about like 66 right now, 65. I think they should say
Okay,
that.
fair. He looks good for his age.
Yeah, he looks good for his age. So if you say he's like 66, something like that, I think it's plausible for him to be fighting Mads Mikkelsen. I think it's possible. So I think, and they do say it takes place in the '60s, which I'm excited for because
Yep.
there's a lot of great things in the '60s.
Hmm.
I hope they use their time period very well.
Yeah, yeah, they'll probably do some hippie stuff for sure.
Yeah, imagine Indiana Jones smokes the weed.
So let's talk about what the possible MacGuffins might be for this movie. And for anyone that doesn't know, the MacGuffin is you wanna explain it?
Basically the thing that drives the plot forward. So usually the artifact in every Indiana Jones movie.
So
The
the
Ark,
Crystal
the
Skull, the Ark, the Holy Grail, and
Shankara
the
stones.
Shankara Stones. So for
So
this movie, what could it be? I know we were talking about Fountain of Youth before. Maybe it's that.
so there was a rumor that was going out of about a month or two ago that the next movie is going to be about the Fountain of Youth. Which I mean, I think it's a bit too similar to the Grail, if that happens. It's
Agreed.
you drink from it, but I think it's they purposely made a rumor like that. They did the same thing for Crystal Skull, where they made false stories,
Okay.
false titles and stuff. I think that's what it is.
Well, it
Um,
definitely it's not going to be aliens again. I
yeah,
don't think that they would do that.
no, they're not going to
It's
do
going to
it.
be something
Christian.
worldly.
I think it's going to be Christian just because Disney likes to play it safe usually.
But they've done Christian twice already. Well, I
But
guess Ark of the
let
Covenant
they
is you can
Jewish
say that's
kind of.
Jewish, but
But Disney just wants to like they're just gonna look. What were the most successful movies first and third? Let's just
but
follow that
they
path.
could do, yeah, because it's easy. Like for example, almost everyone knows what the Ark of the Covenant is, or everybody
Yeah,
like in the
it's so
Western world,
iconic, right?
everyone knows what the Holy Grail is. I think
Right.
we were talking before. Maybe it could be Excalibur,
That
the
yeah, some people
sword,
have been saying
King
that,
Arthur's
right?
sword. That would be cool. I would like that. I think a
Some
lot
people
of people
actually
know
brought
that.
up something very interesting that they're gonna do the arc again
Ah,
because
I wouldn't like that.
in in Indy 4, the warehouse chase at one point, one of the crates gets chipped open and the arc is in there.
Hmm.
So it's the possibility that it gets stolen again. I mean, that's the ultimate thing of playing it safe. Let's just do the most iconic MacGuffin in the entire series.
Yeah,
Let's just do it again.
I don't think they should do it. I think that would be terrible. Because, like I said before, the Indiana Jones movies are an environment to explore these like sort of mystical, ancient topics, and to rehash something, I think would be a sign of weakness. I think they got to do something new. I'm not sure exactly what. Maybe. I think you said that they did Atlantis already.
Yeah, there's a video game called The Fate of Atlantis, right?
Okay, so they technically, I mean, it wouldn't be too bad if they did it in the movie, even though they done it in the video game. Did they do El Dorado? City of
The
Gold.
fourth movie, basically, they say Akator, which is the city where the aliens are, it was also
Oh,
called El
is
Dorado.
El Dorado? Okay, okay, that
Right,
makes
that's what the
sense.
name for it.
Yeah, there's not much unless you want to start taking from like the Middle East or from
Listen,
China and
I
stuff like
think it'd
that.
be cool if they did release, but like if they do like Egyptian stuff, but that's way too mummy. It's people are gonna make too many
Yeah,
comparisons to
the
the mummy.
Mummy movies have kind of touched like the Book of the Dead, for example, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
already
don't
been
think
done in the first
uh,
Mummy movie.
right.
I mean, they could do some ancient Greece stuff, like we were talking about
Yeah, definitely.
before.
With the multiple gods, right? That'd be
The
kind of interesting.
fleece. What was it? The
I
golden
think
fleece,
yeah, something like that.
right? There's that. But yeah, I don't. It'll be interesting to see what they choose.
Yeah,
Um,
but again, I think they're gonna play it safe and choose a Christian or a Jewish artifact because
mhm.
Disney wants to make as be as successful as
Something
possible.
that a lot of people know, but you got to
Yeah.
see. I mean, there's a lot of movies that a lot of Hollywood is trying to appeal to China these days. So maybe they might try. I mean, the
No,
Mummy did it,
but
right?
Indiana Jones
The
killing
Mummy went
Chinese people.
full China, so
Yeah,
you
but
never
then
know.
Indiana Jones killing Chinese. You think they'll be like you know what I mean? They couldn't.
Doing what, sorry?
Wouldn't that if it takes place in China? There's gonna be Chinese villains then surely. They wouldn't. I don't think they'd do that.
Maybe.
I mean, you got a taste for China in the
Maybe
beginning.
when
Of
was Vietnam?
couple of,
Vietnam was the 70s. Yeah, so that
right.
hadn't happened yet. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
I think you should just bring the Russians back. To be honest, I like the Russians. I think they're fine. They've only
Yeah,
done it
because
once.
you've done the Nazis twice, so it's like maybe the Russians
Oh,
twice
and
wouldn't be too
since
bad.
Steven Spielberg, he's no longer directing, but he's still a hands-on producer. he didn't want to do Nazis again because after doing Schindler's List, he kind of saw them in a different light that they were too fucked up to do again.
Hmm.
Like in a fun movie like Indy, they're not gonna do Nazis again. I'm fairly certain. If Spielberg has a good amount of creative control, they're not gonna do Nazis again.
Okay, so I guess we're just gonna have to see. I mean, it has to be something kind of from the ancient world because it follows the
Yeah.
archaeological thing, right? So I can't really think of
There's like stuff like the
anything.
Garden of Eden and stuff like that, but
Maybe the apple that was first eaten by Adam and Eve. I don't know.
maybe yeah, we'll see. But I'm looking forward to it still.
Yeah. Okay. So last thing we'll talk about, any any rumors that you've heard. I know that you're pretty live on the forums and stuff and talking to other fans. So what have you heard down the pipeline about anything that might be upcoming for this movie?
The biggest rumor that was coming out in a while was the whole what's it called, the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah.
Uh, and apparently it was gonna feature at one point. Indiana Jones was gonna drink from it and become de-aged at one point.
Oh
Which
wow. Then they'd really have to use CGI to make him look young. Eh?
maybe at the end of the like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I ultimately I don't know. I think it was gonna maybe take place in the Bermuda Triangle or something like that,
Oh, interesting.
which could be. But that means there's gonna be like boat stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg doesn't like shooting in the water, but he's not technically shooting actually. Never mind, because he's only a producer this time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
But you know what? Ultimately, there's not been a lot of rumors on the plot itself, but rather, what's it called? What basically, to be honest, there just been theories of people saying like maybe it should be about the Ark again, but there haven't been a lot of rumors that have actually specifically come out of Lucasfilm or Disney.
I'm sure that'll ramp up as we get closer and closer to the movie.
Yeah, like recently again, they haven't been for so many years. They weren't saying anything about this movie. It was getting delayed so many times, and I was kind of getting angry. And a lot of fans were
And now,
also
so
like,
it
"It's never
finally
gonna happen."
feels like there's progress being made.
Yeah, for a while, at one point, we like after the community thought this is just not gonna happen. Harrison Ford's gonna get too old. Every year they wait, the worse it gets. They're never gonna do it.
Wow.
Um, but finally announcing three new cast members, and they also officially confirmed John Williams is coming back. That's like something to look forward to, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's awesome.
like the fact that they've announced three different cast members in like a month or two, he's like, that's it's very nice.
Okay, so let's end this off on a few just a few quick questions, all right? Your if you had to pick one of the movies, only one, which would be your absolute favorite?
It's usually between battling every day between Raiders and Crusade. In the current mood I'm in, I think I'd go Raiders.
Raiders? Okay, I would say Crusade for me.
Crusade, huh? But
Favorite
ultimately,
MacGuffin?
also the Ark of the Covenant. I like the Holy Grail a lot, and I even think the Crystal Skull is quite interesting. Don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
But I think the Ark of the Covenant's the most iconic prop.
Okay,
Yeah.
I go with the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And last question, favorite side character?
Okay. Short round.
For
Short round.
me too. Me too. Short round is
But
absolutely just
Marion and Sean Connery are really close for me.
me too. Yeah, yeah. I think we're exactly aligned on
Yeah.
that point. Okay,
Here's
so I think
25.
that's the end of our podcast. We went a lot longer than we were expecting to. We thought this would go for like 30 minutes, and we've been an hour and 50 minutes now.
Wow.
So yeah, that closes our conversation on Indy. We'll probably do another shorter podcast on this if after the trailer comes out for the new movie.
Yeah. Speculation.
So we'll do some speculation. We'll analyze the trailer since it'll probably be short, like 2-3
To be honest,
minutes
I'll
or something.
probably watch it like hundreds of times, knowing me.
Yeah, for sure. And then hopefully it's good. So we'll see. When is the movie slated to come out?
July of 2022.
So we'll probably get a trailer probably for the what's it called, for the winter.
Yeah. Well, I'm mostly excited. I'm just really hoping because when they were filming Crystal Skull, they released a photo of Harrison Ford in the costume. I really, really hope they just release like maybe in like a few months from now, they just release of Harrison Ford in the costume
Maybe
cracking the whip.
just like a poster, a movie poster or something, right?
like a quick video, just and the video. And
Oh yeah, yeah, one of those. Yeah, yeah. And then it just says, the
he's back.
title or something. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be cool. Okay, so let's close this off. Thanks for joining us, and yeah, that's it.